welcome to Let's Get Kidzsmart. I'm here today with Dr. Poh Tan. Poh is the CEO and founder of STEM Edge Academy, an organisation that matches high school students with academic learning coaches to help them develop lifelong learning skills in STEM. She's also the Director of Strategic Partnerships Development and Fundraising for the Society of Canadian Women in Technology, as well as being a two-time TEDx speaker, a published author and scholar, and an entrepreneur. So thank you so much for being here with me today, Poh.
Thank you so much, Michaela. This is such a great opportunity for me to share. And yeah, thanks for the invitation, for sure.
Yeah, I'm super excited to get chatting today. So if you want to get started with what got you interested in STEM when you were a kid and how did you decide to become a scientist?
Yeah, when I saw that question, I kind of smiled a bit because I think I don't really have the classic story of I was little and I always wanted to be a scientist and things like that.
Yeah.
So it's really funny because in my report card, and I wasn't born in Canada, I was born in Malaysia, and so within the report card, pretty much when you're at kindergarten, they'll ask you, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I was 5 at that time, and I think one of the top things I wanted to be was a teddy bear hugger. I
love
don't know
that.
if that was an actual job. I'm like, I want to hug teddy bears. Number 2 is that I want to be a singer, right? I cannot sing to save my life, but that's what I put down. And so as sort of time went by when I was growing up, I started learning more and more about science in class, like with teachers and, with friends, and sometimes my parents too. My parents would bring me to the science museum. And that's where I sort of started to develop an interest in science. And I'm like, oh, it's actually really interesting because you get to ask questions and you get to find out about different things. And I can almost pinpoint the time when I was in grade 7 and my family were already, we already came to Vancouver, Canada. And in grade 7, my grade 7 teacher asked us to do a project, 2 different projects, one on lobsters and the other one on flight, right? And so that was sort of my first time doing sort of any sort of scientific project. I guess if you can even call that a scientific project.
Yeah.
Lobsters weren't really my favorite, but I did it anyways. And it was kind of like the first few steps into this is what research is like. This is what looking for information at the library is like. This is what putting information together is like, learning all about lobsters. And then after the second project is about flight. And that's where I start getting really, really creative about building, a jet plane out of bamboo skewer sticks and tissue paper. And I think that's where the spark came. I'm like, oh, this is what science is about. It's about finding out things, creativity, being curious, and really sort of driving your what you want to learn about, and having a good guide like a teacher. So that's sort of where that spark came, and after that, it never stopped. So in high school, I was geared towards science, and then in my bachelor's, I was geared towards science, and then I went for my first PhD, and I never really intended to go into stem cell biology. It's just that I knew I wanted to be in a field where I wanted to contribute in some positive way to human health. So whether it was stem cell biology or understanding, cancer biology, oncology, that type of thing. And so I just started looking and, found a really good group at the University of British Columbia, and that's where I did my first PhD. And ever since then, I think that's how I wear my scientist hat all the time. So
Who would have thought that all of that came from lobsters?
yeah, right. From teddy bear hugger to lobsters. Yeah, I love eating lobsters, but I don't think I would enjoy studying them. For me,
Yeah. Well, you've definitely come a long way from the teddy bear hugger days.
Yeah.
So research shows that young girls are just as interested in STEM as boys, but their interest tends to drop off before they hit their teenage years. Why does this happen?
Yeah, there's actually quite a bit of literature out there that's being done to understand why there's a drop-off, because when kids start out, like for me in kindergarten and all throughout elementary, it's not that science doesn't exist in schools. It does. But there's quite a bit, like I said, literature out there that talks about how constraints of social expectations of women and girls, even down to gender stereotypes, gender roles, and also the area that I like to really focus on to answer this question is a severe lack of mentors and role models in the STEM field that, look like the person that wants to go into STEM. And I'm more specifically talking about, both women and girls, young girls in general, girls of color, BIPOC girls.
Yeah.
There's a significantly lower percentage of BIPOC women who are in STEM. And if there are, they're not prominently talked about or spotlighted or showcased for the work that they do. And I was watching, Kidsmart's previous, the episode 1 of the blog, and I apologize, I can't remember her name, but she said something really profound. Is that a lot of times when we talk about STEM and science, it's very Western and Eurocentric. So the examples that we give is very Western and Eurocentric. I mean, how many times have I been asked the question of, oh, name me a woman in science. And the first woman's name that pops up is always Marie Curie. I mean, I'm not saying that she didn't do anything important. She did. It's just that those are the names that we are very familiar with, that are brought up in classes. But what about the other names? What about other STEM scientists of color that are not from North America, maybe from South America, Asia? Where are they? So I think it's about changing sort of that narrative when we're teaching science. And I am a science educator, so I'm currently pursuing and completing my second PhD in science education. It's where it's about sort of decentering that dominant way of teaching science, of where we're only providing examples from the Western centric perspective, right? And I think that's why teenage girls start to get less and less interested in science as they go, especially in the fields that are highly male dominated. If we look at Statistics Canada, it shows that fields such as biology or even medicine, there has been a steady increase of females, but in the more male-dominated one, like civil engineering, or my cousin is an aerospace engineer, and usually she's the only woman in the room for it's been years, right? So those things like physical chemistry, math, computing science. So those are the ones where we see young girls dropping off because they don't see mentors like them. They don't see women who are successful looking like them in those fields. So I think that's one of the things that the literature shows. And hopefully we can fix that.
Yeah, I think representation is so important. And I read something before where some research where kids were asked to draw a scientist, and like a really high percentage of them drew a man, which is wild that that's already going on in the minds of children. And yeah, even like you said about your friend who is an aerospace engineer, I remember when I was in university, one of my friends was studying engineering, and there was like 200 people in the course, and there were only 2 women. Like, crazy.
Right. Yeah, and I remember the wonderful blog that you wrote when we were working together on it, where I talked about how there was a time when I regularly volunteer as well, like going into classes and just teaching, demonstrating and teaching science. And that was a time when it was in the kindergarten class, and it was the kids. They were kids in the front of the classroom, and they put up their hand and they say, "Miss Poh, you're a scientist, but you're a girl." Right? So there's still some of that, and it's interesting. It's coming from like a North American classroom, right? Like, this is not somewhere that far off that we're referring to. So
yeah, 100%. And then when it comes to getting more women involved in the STEM workforce, why is it so important that we start by working with young girls and that we focus on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's where their interests start. Like, for myself, my interests start really, elementary school. For my cousin who's an aerospace engineer, and like my other cousins who are even peers who are women in STEM, and they are started in science. Their interest started in science in elementary school. Had they not had support and, like say mentors that they saw that could be in those fields that look like them, I think their interest would have waned and went somewhere else. And that is where, whether you're a boy or a girl, that's where your curiosity it's the deepest when you're at that age. Is that when you start to really ask about questions, why is this? Why is that? What is this? So we sort of have to fan that spark into a flame, right? Rather than trying to just maintain it. And I think that's why it's so important, because that's the first places that they'll get introduced to. This is what science is. It's not gender specific. We're not stereotyping you that you can only be in a field of healthcare. No, if you want to be an aerospace engineer, yes, you can be. And I wanted to talk a little bit about this later on in a different question, but I guess I'll bring it up now. It's showing girls that even though you're the only girl in the room, that's okay, right? And it's yours. It turns it into a strength instead of saying, oh, you're the only girl, so therefore, to conform, maybe you have to work harder. Maybe you have to wear pants. Maybe you have to wear, or maybe you have
not the pants.
Yeah, not the pants. So it's like, no. I've had comments said to me that you're doing science, but then you're wearing a dress. It's like, yes, my response is, I'm doing science and I'm wearing a dress. You're right. So it's kind of changing that response and that narrative and turning it into a more of a positive, right? So that is why it's so important. It's too. Then you wouldn't lose them as they go into high school and undergrad.
I love that. I love that frame of thinking as well. Like, it just kind of reminded me of what I said there. Like, oh my God, my friend there was only 2 girls in the whole class, and it's like, there were 2 girls in the class, and she was one of them, and that's amazing.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Why is gender equality in the STEM workforce so important, and what kind of problems can arise when there's an imbalance?
Yeah, so it's really important. I mean, it's not about just, when we talk about equality, it's not just about putting, and I'm speaking from my own experience, it's not just about putting a woman in STEM as a token, right? It's about putting them in a place of position that they actually have real authority and voice at the table to make, changes within the company, changes at the policy level, and not just, because you're Asian, so you're just checking off a box and therefore you get hired, right? And it's important because it's critical to innovation. I mean, science is all about innovation, creation, solutions. I mean, that's why we do it. That's why we ask the tough questions, and that's why we do the tough experiments of, I think what my supervisor for my first PhD used to say is that as a scientist, you have to be okay with doing 99, like doing a total of 100 experiments, for example. 99 of them does not work. You're trying to scratch your head like, why doesn't it work? And that one time working, right? The one time working. But that's what innovation entails, is that you're trying things that didn't work. You're trying to figure out why it doesn't work. And I think women bring a lot of that innovative piece to science. And I think without that gender equity piece, we lose that. And if we want to talk about different perspective and different approaches to science, then how can we have different perspective and approaches when we're limiting science to a certain gender? And I'm not saying that organizations out there are, I'm not trying to generalize. What I'm trying to say, organizations are trying to prevent I guess, women, or intentionally excluding. But there's a lot of systemic barriers and institutional barriers that prevent, STEM BIPOC women of color to even be at the table to make these decisions, to be at the table, to be part of the group, to be innovative and creative, right? So I think some of the problems that I can see is that without more of that gender equality, you get more of the same things. You're constantly spinning a wheel. I always use the picture of, like a hamster running in a wheel, like in a circle, where the hamster thinks that they're going somewhere. But if you zoom out and you look at the picture, they're not really going anywhere. They're moving, but they're always coming up, with the same circle, right? Same wall. So when we have, not just gender, I guess gender, race equality as well, different perspectives, that's where you really start to make a difference. Because in the end, not one person and not one group have all the answers. That's why nature doesn't work this way, right? Like it's all about a collective, a collaborative approach to solving things. So that's why I feel that the gender equality thing is so important, especially for STEM.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. And what can STEM-based companies do right now to kind of help get more girls involved in STEM?
Yeah. I think when we talk about young girls, to start off with, is to be open with like things like internships or mentorships, especially by women who hold certain positions of power in those companies. I mean, again, I'm speaking from my own experiences that I've had internships, like paid and unpaid. Usually back then, my mentors were usually men. And if I were mentored by women at the organization, unfortunately, they were usually either the person who is the assistant to the man that's in the lead role, or the person who is, plays not as a significant role as the lead of the project, right? So it's time to switch that, is that if you're going to have an internship, if you're going to have a mentoring sort of opportunity for young girls, let's do it so that girls can sit beside or job shadow or learn about what it's like to be an aerospace engineer, like to be on the floor, asking questions, being in a room full of men, let's just say, what is that like, right? Yeah. So I think that's the first thing for young girls. Second is that, for undergrads, for youth, for young women who are starting to think about, okay, this is the field I want to go into, is to have, opportunities where they can see real things that are happening at the company. Is like, okay, well, these are the things that we struggle with. And these are the questions that we have. I guess what I'm saying is that you have them participate in a real way, rather than say, okay, you're here and this is to check off a box and you're only here for a couple weeks. Okay, then you're gone, right? Let's have them have some real contributions, because then they feel that, okay, my skills are valued, my opinions are valued, and I'm contributing. I'm contributing to a change, to a cause, right? And I think the other thing with that, I'm going to put my mom hat on, because I do have two young children. And from my own experience, I think right now there still are a lot of STEM companies who are still developing when it comes to mom scientists, I guess you can say.
Okay.
So there are quite a bit of changes that still has to be made in order to support, mom scientists who are, say, coming back from maternity leave, let's just say, or just the stigma of like having to have kids and then going off on maternity leave and then coming back feeling like there's a deficit or there's a judgment type thing, you know? So I think organizations, rather than saying, oh, we support women, but to show it's like, how are you supporting mothers? How are you supporting, what does that mean? And for me, that means that, and I'm not talking about making drastic, accommodations, that type of thing, but it's that shift of thinking where, and that understanding that, and also that acceptance that you can be a scientist and you can also be a mother, and that's okay, right? And that it's that change. And I think for mothers like myself is to not be apologetic about it. That's the thing too, is not having to say, oh, I'm sorry, I cannot be at this meeting because I have to take my kid to the orthodontist. Why are we apologizing?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? I mean, this is why sometimes I get questions from classes like, oh, you're a scientist, but you're a girl. So that needs to change. You're a scientist and you're a girl, or you're a scientist and you're a mom, and that's fine. That's good.
Amazing. I love that approach. And yeah, I think it's really important what you were saying about internships and actually getting people or getting girls involved in the process as opposed to just like coming by and watching and not really knowing if they can see themselves doing it in the future because they haven't been given that opportunity to truly get involved and see what they can do.
I wanted to add to that. I mean, I talked a little bit about the gender role and gender stereotype, right? Like, so a lot of these times when a lot of these opportunities, then it perpetuates that stereotype is that, okay, you're a girl, you're in this field, so therefore you have to start off this way, or these are the tasks that you must do first. And it's often tasks that makes girls or women feel inadequate. It's like, okay, because I just graduated, I guess I have to do this before I get to this certain point.
Yeah.
Right? So it perpetuates that image.
Yeah, I get that. And then what are some of your favorite organizations that are making a difference for girls in STEM at the moment? And please tell us a little bit more about STEM Edge Academy too.
Thanks. Yeah. So STEM Edge Academy is something I started because I realized that a lot with science education, it's not only about the foundational knowledge of science, because that one, you can easily get it from a textbook, or you can get it from, classes, and, there's lots of YouTube videos that you can learn about, the foundational knowledge of science. Like, if you want to know about Newton's law, I mean, I don't have to teach you that. You can just simply Google it.
Yeah.
But it's that piece where I want to loop back in the very beginning of this interview where you asked me about, what's the importance of gender equality, right, in the workplace. And I talked about how it's important it's the innovation piece, the creativity piece. So where does that innovation and creativity come from in STEM? It's from developing academic and research skills. It's not just about knowing the content. It's about knowing what do you do with that content. And I'm not talking about just application. I'm talking about knowledge application and reflection on those skills. And what do I mean by reflection is that you have a problem, say a scientific problem. You want to solve it. You're working within a group. The group is really diverse. It's made out of engineers, creative people, mathematicians, data analysts, all types, right? And they're all people from different backgrounds as well. BIPOC people, people who went to universities outside of North American context. And so that critical reflective piece comes in is that, okay, we have a problem to solve. It's a scientific problem. How do we do this? We all have foundational knowledge. We all know how to apply the knowledge. How do we work together to find the solution? And how do we continue to work together when we hit a roadblock? Because in science, when you hit a roadblock, oftentimes there's a lot of discussion, and sometimes there's a lot of disagreements, right? Whenever you have a lot of smart people around a table, you're going to have disagreements.
Yeah.
It's sort of like predictable, you're going to have disagreements. So how do we get through those disagreements within a scientific context? So that is what STEM Edge Academy does, is that we work with high school students who know that they want to pursue a STEM career, but to also train them in those skills where once you encounter these situations, what do you do? And we give them these skills so that it's transferable to, like, if you were to say transition from STEM and you want to be in social sciences, it's the same thing. You're still working with people. You still have that foundational knowledge, right? So yes, that's what STEM Edge is about. Organizations that is doing really important work right now is, as you mentioned, SWIS, Society for Canadian Women in Science and Tech, which I'm a volunteer at. And they have multitudes of programs from kids from K to 12 to youth at the university, and then up to where women who are really immersed in their fields as well, who maybe want to make a career change. So they have programs to help girls understand that this is what STEM fields are like. These are the mentors you want to talk to. So that's one of my favorites. Other ones is Let's Talk Science and Science Alive. I think they are usually at the universities, and I find that they always have opportunities for, boys and girls, but they are starting to have girls-only programs, and they try to introduce them to coding. But the neat thing, what I like about that, is that they bring them to the university. And they actually get to see, okay, this is what it's like to sit in the lecture hall, right? And I love what Kidzsmart is doing right now. I follow your work on social media, and I think that the indirect and informal learning about these things is also really important, because not all the time that we get information and education from a classroom setting, from a post-secondary setting, right? So that sort of informal sort of educational piece that Kidzsmart provide is also super important to meet sort of the different puzzle pieces in this. So I could name a few more, but I won't, because it'll take up too much time.
That's okay. And yeah, I think what you're doing with STEM Edge Academy is extremely important. And what you were saying there about, like, multiple smart people being at the table and there's going to be disagreements, and, like, training girls to, like, this is how you, like, deal with all of this. I think that's super important, because when you said that, I was like, oh my God, that sounds so daunting. I would not be able to do that. So I can only imagine how it would feel as a woman who's, like, freshly out of college, first job in STEM, and it's like, oh, okay, this is a lot.
Yeah, and that happens, we do it with humility and humbleness, right? Mm-hmm. But then I think in the end is to be, in the conversation where you are contributing something. You've come a long way. You've graduated from a bachelor's, a master's, PhD, postdocs. You have something to contribute, right?
Yeah.
Never apologize for that. I usually, when I mentor, because I mentor women, both women and men who are doing their MBA, for example, or who are doing their postdocs for a PhD in STEM, I always tell them, especially for the women, is that don't apologize. What are you apologizing for?
Yes.
If you've made a genuine mistake, then yes, you apologize, and then let's try to find a solution. But if it's something where you feel that, oh, I want to add my idea, I'm sorry, can I add? No, why are you apologizing? You're adding an idea, right? So I think my narrative in this interview is that it's the most important thing is the change of narrative and the change of perspective of how you look at things.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I love that. I love that approach. And I'm sure that there are people who want to learn a little bit more about you as well. So where can people find you online?
Yeah, so if you don't remember the website, if you simply just Google my name, my website will come up. It's pohtanphd.ca. So there is, if you're curious about some of the work that I've published, so I've published in the stem cell community, but also in the educational area. So where I talk about different approaches in science education, also working internationally with teachers in, for example, Brazil and things like that. So I've published there. Also, if you're curious about my TEDx talk, one, I do talk about stem cell biology, and the other one, I talk about education specifically. Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn as well, and I'm on Twitter. I don't know if you can remember this, but my Twitter handle is at Dr. Poh Tan. So if you want to follow me, I do share and talk about different approaches to, science learning. And I also talk a lot about, gender equality in STEM, like promoting girls and stuff like that. Yeah, I think I don't do Instagram. I'm sorry, but so that's the social platform I'm on now.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with me today. I learned a lot, and I'm sure people listening will learn a lot too. So yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Michaela, and thank you to Kidzsmart for this wonderful chance to share my experience and my research and thoughts, and I hope that the audience picked up a couple of nuggets along the way, so that would be great. Thank you so much again.